All right. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy that you're all here. Let's see. Let me make sure I have everything here. Saludos to everyone who is tuning in and excited to learn with us all about coffee today. Um, I am Carla Vasquez, and I am the founder of SalviSoul. SalviSoul started off as a cookbook storytelling project, and now it is a place to celebrate all kinds of Salvadoran food culture. And today we are so fortunate to have such a wonderful and esteemed panel because we're going to unpack coffee, specifically Salvadoran coffee. So we will be having a time for questions, and I know everyone will want to ask a question. So we'll be doing that towards the end. But I would love to introduce our panel. And before I do that, can everyone who has a coffee show off the coffee mug that they have? Everyone has their little. No, you had a different one, Christian. I saw the different one. Everyone, there you go. Yes, I have this. I have shame because I don't have a cool Salvi mug. But yes, I'm so excited that you're all here. So let me get started by introducing Dr. Clelia Rodriguez. I have her bio here that I'd love to share with you all. Dr. Rodriguez was born and raised in Chalatenango, El Salvador. She is a global scholar, author, and speaker, and she has worked in universities, nonprofits all over the world: Ghana, Nepal, Jordan, Chile, and most recently in Bolivia. She has dedicated her energy to developing anti oppressive curricula to disrupt the this word is interesting, homogenizing. How do you? I can't even say the word. Ways of reading, writing, thinking in order to create spaces of unlearning. She's currently teaching at the Ontario Institute for Studies and Education at the University of Toronto. She has a book called Decolonizing Academia, Poverty, Oppression, and Pain. And she's working on a second book titled The Politics of the Uterus, which I would love to read that. That sounds like an amazing read. Then we have our wonderful couple here, Linda and JJ Gonzalez. Linda's a first generation Salvadoran American residing here in LA. She grew up appreciating Salvadoran culture as an aspect very important to her family. And in 2016, with her husband JJ, they founded Café Juayúa, a coffee company that would provide farm direct coffee to the LA area from her parents' farm in the historical town of Guayua, El Salvador. A tradition of coffee growing that has persisted for three generations on ancestral land and has been kept alive by the people of El Salvador. And we have Christian Quintanilla from Don Leo Coffee, yes. Christian was born in El Salvador and is the founder and owner of Don Leo Coffee. This is the first Salvadoran brand of gourmet coffee that is processed at the source and distributed throughout the US with the goal of changing the current business model of the global coffee industry from locally roasted to something that provides more revenue for coffee farmers and is processed at the source. And then, last but certainly not least, we have Daniel Olivares down over there. And he is the founder and president of El Cielito Café, a coffee shop that represents Latin America and helps the farmers of various Latino countries. At an early age, he decided he wanted to lead his life with purpose and helping his fellow Latinx community and bringing them hope by purchasing coffee directly from farmers, a method that goes against almost every other coffee shop's model. Daniel's able to ensure majority of the profits go to the coffee farmers and their farms. So if we were in a real panel, the audience would applaud you. So allow me to do that for everyone's behalf. Thank you all. You're all so wonderful. So I wanted to start off with a question for all of you because reading what you've done, who you are, and the work that you do, I'm definitely wanting to give people an opportunity to get to know what was that moment that caused you to go into coffee and to dive deep into that world. And I'd love for all of you to answer. And why don't we start with Dr. Rodriguez? Here, let me unmute. There you go.
Buenos días. It's a pleasure to be sharing this space with Salvadorian people who appreciate and have the relationship that I think I have with coffee, or maybe the relationships that we have are very different. You know, my approach to coffee, I grew up in El Salvador and I left El Salvador during the Civil War. So the reason why we were displaced and a lot of my family members and friends got killed, it's rooted in coffee for me, in the history of my family. So I did not choose coffee. I feel like coffee chose me. Um, Coffee for me is the most important text in my life. It's the most important symbol, and it's a vivid reminder that there is an entire untold historical record that we haven't even tapped into. So when I drink coffee every single day, there's not one there has not been in my lifetime a moment where I don't drink coffee and I do not think about our descendants that were killed in 1932. And I wish that I could be a coffee taster and I could drink coffee the same way that a lot of people drink it for pleasure. In my case, it's not. So it's an opportunity every single time that I drink coffee that that I'm connected with that history. So that's where it came from, my relationship with coffee.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rodriguez, for sharing that. Let's see, who would like to go next? Let's hear from Linda and JJ.
Absolutely. Dr. Rodriguez, I love what you said about how coffee found you. And it's really the same for us as a family. We grew up in the region that produces coffee, since it first arrived. And so, and it was, as we try to kind of put the language to how we're in coffee, as we were talking with JJ, was like, it's kind of this generational responsibility that we kind of concluded that it was to preserve not just coffee, but the land and the story behind the land of the family. And so that's how we kind of ended up in coffee as well. And as a daughter of immigrant parents and JJ as an immigrant from Guatemala, we understand that responsibility in a very keen way of preserving and maintaining.
Yeah, I think the same way. Obviously, this is about El Salvador coffee, but obviously, as Linda mentioned, right? We for me, as how can I say, like just following really the vision that Linda had for changing the current state, right, of the farms in El Salvador, and be able to make it a more sound, just a sound investment in general, right? Like instead of just kind of like sending money every month, or I see my father-in-law, right, going through that, and my brother-in-law trying to bring about change, right, and be able to also develop a new vision for the business. Of course, at the beginning, we had no idea really what we're getting ourselves into, but that was kind of like the genesis of it all. So definitely, I think for us, it's always been about, like Linda mentioned, just a responsibility towards our people, right, our family, in general, right? And in that case, I have to say that I am 12.5% Salvadorian. 12.5% Salvadorian to my great grandma who was from Sonsonate. So it's an interesting adventure. Yeah. Thank you.
Christian or Daniel, whoever wants to go, popcorn it out. Go ahead.
I'll go. Me. I can relate absolutely to both Dr. Rodriguez's and JJ Linda's stories in the connection back home, right? I was born in El Salvador as well. I lived through the war. But I think, or I know for a fact, there's a very specific moment. I remember the moment when I was sitting at home, and it was in 2010, and it was around the summertime. And I know this because, so I've always loved coffee. And every time I would travel to El Salvador, I would bring back coffee because I was like, oh man, I love the coffee, so I got to bring some back home, right, to LA. And then I ran out. And then I was like, damn, I got to wait till I go in August or para Navidad to like bring some back, right? And this was like the moment where not only like the coffee curiosity, but also the entrepreneurial curiosity, like the seed was planted, right? And it was like the thread that unraveled everything, because I was like, wait a minute, there's got to be some coffee here somewhere. I'm in LA. I'm in LA. And in 2010, I went out to all the grocery stores, you name it. I mean, I went to several Whole Foods. I went around to like the Starbucks, the Coffee Beans, like, and I was looking around. I'm like, okay, it's got to be Salvadoran coffee somewhere. Could not find it. And to me, I was like, that's a problem. Why can't I, as a Salvadoran, knowing that there's a lot of Salvadoran coffee that is grown, that is distributed, why can't I find it here in the US, like in LA of all places, with all these Salvadoreños? And I was like, okay, somebody's going to have to do something about this, right? At the time, I didn't know it was going to be me. I was like, okay, it's got to be somebody somewhere, right? And then it stuck with me since then, you know? And like I said, that was the little thread, because what happened was I started doing research, and I started reading up on the history of coffee in El Salvador to learn more about why, like what happened, like where did all the coffee go, right? And as I started to like read up on it, it became a whole lot more than like, oh, it's this like maybe potential business idea. It was more like, oh wow, like coffee has done this much for our country's history, economy, and culture, and has been used politically and in so many other ways to also hinder the growth of our people, and during the war, and so much was taken away. But it also has the ability and the potential to give so much more if used. I see it as a tool if used properly, right? And also beyond like the economic impact it can have, the cultural impact, the empowerment that it can have. So I don't know, it just grew to so much more. First, it was like, well, how do we get Salvadoran coffee in LA or in the US, to just everything that it is now. So I feel like in a way, yes, it called me, because no matter what I did, it just, the curiosity just snowballed into like, I have to do something about this, you know? So that was my moment.
All right, Daniel, you want to go?
Yeah, so well, disclaimer, I'm not Salvadoran. I'm Mexican American, but I'm trying to earn my honorary Salviness, so hopefully it's through coffee. But basically, yeah, just to jump on with kind of what everyone has, you know, like coffee just kind of came into my life. I'm from Echo Park, kind of.
Daniel, I think you are cutting in and out, friend. Does everyone see that? Yeah.
I think we may have lost the signal.
Um,
Hey, Daniel, I think you're cutting in and out. Oh no.
Wow.
Let's see. maybe one of us can message him. Yeah, I see you doing that, JJ. JJ's got it. Okay, let's see.
Carla, I think you're on mute.
Okay, can you all hear me? Yes, perfect. I think what I'm going to do is, here we go. Oh, we may have lost him there. Daniel has a wonderful store, wonderful cafe in, what is it, Southeast LA? Southeast LA area, El Cielito Café. And hopefully he'll be able to share with us how he got started in coffee. I definitely know that he is intent on bringing Central American coffee to LA, and for folks here, consumers here in LA, to appreciate it. So his contribution is definitely very important. So hopefully he'll be able to jump back on the call and we can add him on. One of the things that I really loved about what all you had to say about coffee is your familial connection with coffee, right? I have stories of my grandmother picking coffee in los cafetales. And so that is definitely something that was my first kind of story introduction. So I'd love to know from all of you. Oh, wait, hold on. We have Daniel's back. Let's give it a go another time. Daniel, can you hear us, friend? I don't know that he can hear us. I see the wheel of doom here. All right, so let me see if I can get this figured out here. But let's see if we can move on to the next question of Dr. Rodriguez. You brought up understanding coffee from the context of, you know, the awful chapter in 1932. And I really appreciated you sharing that, because I don't think that a lot of Salvadorans, much less a lot of non-Salvadorans, know this about El Salvador. And I don't know if you could maybe expand on some of that.
Yeah, thank you, Carla. So I don't know if you're able to see here, but I have a coffee bean here. I don't know if can you see it?
Yes.
So these you know, some people carry the rosaries in terms of distress. A lot of people pray, and you know, we all connect spiritually with higher beings. I come from a farm. I grew up, you know, surrounded by nature and animals, and with a truly respectful way to connect with the land. So for me, when I said earlier the coffee is the most important text for me, I literally mean that. There's every time that I teach something at the beginning of the semester, I usually tell students that this coffee bean, it's like a walking library, and that we could write I feel like every Salvadorian who has been particularly directed by the Civil War, by the violent history of El Salvador, we could all write a book about that seed, which is the coffee bean. In my case, it's an important political disclaimer to share that this is the most important text for me. And whenever I grab a little bit of soil, like whenever I go to El Salvador, whenever I'm there and I travel through the places where where indigenous people were massacred, and I touch the soil, I'm connected with blood, because there are remnants of blood, there's remnants of bones, there are remnants of crying and agonizing cries that are still there. And I remember the first time I was able to go back to El Salvador when we got the landed immigrant status here in Canada. someone offered me to say, someone said, oh, tenés que hacer la ruta del café de las flores. And I was like, what's that? And I don't look at it like that. I look at it as like, that we should be rethinking the way that we map the history of El Salvador through coffee, through flowers, through sugar, through cotton, because the way that I approach El Salvador from traumatic experience, the way that I map El Salvador is through a different, like culturally, it's very different than as people, want to paint El Salvador as like a very touristy attraction and with an enormous, a country with a lot of tremendous economic opportunities. Yes, it is that, and that's important. And at the same time, we also need to bring back what it actually means to be traveling through those territories, because there's still, it's because our ancestors are there and they have not been acknowledged. And even though there is a huge there could be like a huge attempt to recognize in the coffee industry right now, as it stands, people talk a lot about social responsibility in the corporate sector, but in the way that histories have been erased in how the history of El Salvador, it continues to be relevant, it's not only problematic, but it's insulting to me. And it should be, and we should feel insulted. And if we are engaged in the, like, I don't sell coffee. My approach to coffee, as I said, is from a personal perspective, and I have incorporated coffee in all the pedagogies that I do and in my teaching. And I think that we have a historical responsibility, because intergenerational trauma, it's true, is there. I'm living proof of that. Intergenerational healing, it's also true, but we have not so much a social responsibility when we engage with coffee talks, but also a historical responsibility that incorporates different ways of portraying El Salvador and acknowledging that in those lands, especialmente en Chalatenango y en Sonsonate, in Ahuachapán, there's blood when we walk in that soil, and it's there. It doesn't go away. It's there. So I don't even know if that answered your question, but that's what I just wanted to share. Thanks.
You definitely answered it, Dr. Rodriguez. And I think that is something really beautiful. And I definitely respect your work so much, because a lot of what, even the journey of SalviSoul is understanding the food history, right? Just like we have traveled, our foods have traveled, and our food ingredients have also had traumas that will always impact its people. With regard to some of the food history that you mentioned, I would love to get a little bit more context from the two folks who have Salvadoran coffee brands and who do work with the coffee farmers closely. And I know, Linda, your uncle is a person who works. You have tons of family members that work for you. So I'd love to, taking some of what Dr. Rodriguez has said about, there being blood in the soil. And I have goosebumps just thinking about it, because it's so real. It's absolutely something that every Salvadoran should reconcile with, right? So I'd love to hear from both Café Juayúa and Don Leo. And we have, I believe, Daniel back, so we'll hear from him after. Amazing. Let's hear from him after we hear from our two Salvi Coffee folks. So yeah, the floor is yours, whichever one wants to go first.
I can go first. I guess it's very real. Yeah, the 1932 massacre was something that I definitely explored more, as I learned more of why my family had coffee, why they were in coffee, how long they were in coffee, and learning about coffee and developing Café Juayúa has definitely been like a moment of like self-understanding and discovery, because even though I feel like some things are really obvious, that yes, there were indigenous people in El Salvador and this is what it looked like, it wasn't obvious to me. And it had to be like something I had to read about and see the history and then reflect and see photos and be like, wow, like we are indigenous and somehow we're still in coffee. And it was something very fascinating, because historically coffee obviously has been a European, right? It is the European byproduct of colonization. And usually the coffee barons, what they were called, were people that descended from Europe, from Spain. And so I was always interested how could my family still why they were growing coffee, and like what was the story behind it, like what was there before. And so I think one of the interesting facts about one of our farms, which is La Montaña, is that it used to be communal land. And we know historically that communal land became outlawed. You had to have a title, right, if you wanted to keep your land. And so somehow my great-grandfather got a title and they started to grow coffee, so they got to keep it. And so things like that I've been picking up just historically and understanding how Café Juayúa is a different narrative than maybe other coffee in El Salvador, that we really did experience the 1932 massacre. I remember my grandmother telling me that in another of our farms, Las Lluvias, which is a lot closer to Juayúa, which is our town, all the males of the family had to hide in it for several weeks, and so they wouldn't be murdered. And so it's really fascinating how just different our story, our coffee story, is from possibly any other ones. And I likewise, we want to advocate and share that difference, that history is there, that it's not a romantic story about coffee growing in the fields. No, it's really there's really stories of struggle, of perseverance, of resistance. And so that's why we're just really proud to say, well, this is Café Juayúa, and it's a word that originates from Nahuatl, and we want to share it with the world.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Linda. I remember, I think Dr. Rodriguez, you mentioned this, like learning about La Ruta de las Flores. And the first person I heard talking about La Ruta de las Flores was you, Linda. And I was like, what is that? Having a very similar experience and being so disconnected. So I applaud so much of the work you're doing. Christian.
I share the same sentiment about the history of coffee and the weight that it carries, and the sacrifices that have been made. And it's impossible to really detach ourselves from it. I can relate it. I think a lot of Salvadorans can relate beyond coffee in general, but the stories of like losing everything due to whatever conflicts were going on, right? I know the stories. I've heard the stories multiple times of, well, I mean, it was prior to me being born, and also while I was growing up in El Salvador, stories from my grandparents, like having to literally up and leave with the entire family. My grandparents had 10 children, 9 boys during the war, whom, as Linda just stated, were basically very high risk. So they had to flee from town to town, fleeing the war. So because they would hear, like, there literally was one specific story that grandma told me where it was like one night their next door, like en el otro terreno neighbor came over crying because some man just came and killed his 2 sons. What are you going to do? What do you do when you have like 9 boys and your neighbor's 2 sons just got killed. You leave everything behind immediately. And so while the land wasn't taken away from them physically, they had to give it up because they were just, I mean, it was either that or lose someone in the family. Fortunately, they were able, everyone's alive, everyone survived, which is amazing to me. And so that's part of my story, and I carry that with me all the time. And my perspective on it is, I cannot forget it. No, absolutely not. Like all these sacrifices that have been made, the people whose shoulders like we are standing on because, they're the ones who couldn't make it out, right? And we are here in other countries having amazing opportunities. Like I would feel like the most ungrateful person if I didn't do as much as I possibly can with my life, having the opportunities that I have, because there are 6 million plus Salvadorans back home that don't have the same opportunities, that wish they had half the opportunities I had, right? So my perspective on it is, I'm gonna do whatever it is that I can do to take that history and turn it into something positive, like help the future of the people that are still there. Yes, there's a lot of blood that was shed, but I know that coffee, just and speaking from just the perspective of the future vision that I have for my company and what it can do for the people of El Salvador, for the farmers, not just the farmers, but the economy in general. Like, I want to take that and turn those sacrifices, and I don't want to let it die, because if we don't do anything about it, it's already like not even, I'd say it's probably a quarter or less of what it used to be. And yes, it absolutely was impacted by politics. It always has been. And the socioeconomic status of those who owned the land, who wanted the land, and absolutely a lot of greed. But it absolutely, Dr. Rodriguez mentioned corporate responsibility. Like, yes, I'm, by the sheer fact that I own a company, I created a company, I'm a capitalist. I do think of myself as a social capitalist. Why? Because I'm not in it for the money. The idea behind this is to help get the record. Coffee is being bought, like Starbucks is going down there and buying a ton of Salvadoran coffee anyway, and they're exploiting our people. And I'm sure you guys can attest to this, because they don't pay the same amount that we would pay, because we know that these are our people. Like, it takes one of us. Like, the Starbucks executives don't care, or they are not going to change their business model to help the farmers. They are not. However, one of us who has a vested interest can absolutely change the business model. I know, because of my financial background, I know the margins. I know that I can absolutely still have a viable business, make money for myself, and help the economy down there. Like, those people still need help. Like, yes, there's a lot of sacrifice that's been made, but I don't want the people that are still there to also be sacrificed because of it, right? So I don't know. I that's my vision. I like to think of it as like, let's not waste all that sacrifice. Like, I want to take this and turn the future into something amazing because of it.
Thank you so much, Cristiana. And I do remember you mentioning how when you first approached a few coffee farmers, they didn't know kind of what you were talking about and the idea you had. So I know it's come a long way, because it was almost like they were used to the exploitation. And you were saying, no, I want you to come back with more. And they're like, no, we don't do this.
Yeah, they thought I was going to do. They thought I wanted what Starbucks wants, and I'm like, no. I want the absolute opposite. I want you to get the recognition and the income, the revenue that comes with it. You do the work, and if I can make this grow, then I can do that for more coffee farmers, for more producers, and that's the idea. And take away from and change that Starbucks business model. Like, Starbucks is just a U.S. company that brings coffee from all over the world. And the same phenomena happens with Guatemala and Honduras and Costa Rica. It's the same thing all over the world with all the coffee producing companies. The only brand globally that I know that is doing it differently or has a similar model to what I'm trying to do is Juan Valdez, because they're Colombian, they're 100% Colombian. I don't know the details, obviously, because they're a privately owned company, but they're the only actual Colombian brand distributing Colombian coffee. There's no Costa Rican brand distributing Costa Rican coffee here. There's US brands, there's Starbucks, there's Intelligentsia, Stumptown, bringing coffee from all of our countries, not paying enough and not giving it enough credit and recognition. And that's kind of like my gripe with the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell, and also I have read and looked into that, and I would also love if after this, I know that all of you have kind of done some reading. I'd love to collect maybe a required reading for folks because our audience is very diligent in wanting to educate themselves, and I did get requests for what can I read to educate myself further. Um, so thank you for sharing that. And I want to make sure that Daniel over here feels feels as appreciated. So Daniel, why don't you introduce yourself and also now that we're on the topic of,
Yeah.
you know, how are we changing these models? I know that your cafe, you built it on the premise that your bottom line isn't just what you make, but it's also like, are the coffee farmers being treated well? Are they getting paid? So I'd love to hear kind of how has that been super easy? Has it been a walk in the park for you? I'm sure it has. Totally being sarcastic here, but yeah, feel free to take the floor.
Yeah, for sure. So it was difficult enough trying to introduce specialty coffee into the market, like the Latino market, because we're so used to like Nescafe. We're so used to coffees that's just so instant, and it's just like, and that's it, right? They're like, I don't care where it comes from. I just want instant coffee that tastes like coffee, right? And to the general like population, coffee that tastes like coffee is actually just tastes like smoke, right? It's just burnt coffee that's, has a very bold like flavor, and people just think that's coffee. So um I say it's funny enough that my in the area that I'm in Southgate, my biggest competition was Burger King across the street because they sold bold tasting coffee for like 30 cents. And I was here trying to sell coffee from like Mexico or Central America for like, $3. And there's this whole situation that like adding on to the exploitation that a lot of coffee farmers feel is that a lot of customers, they were actually like descendants, like let's say grandsons or sons of people that worked in the farms. So they were used to being exploited, like, oh well, my dad was only getting paid 25 cents for picking the coffee, why are you selling me this latte back at $3? And it's like it spills into that as well. So it affects all dynamics, just all over the place. And I had to like have these coffees that were like, lower quality and trying to slowly build people up to them. Sad to say that the lower quality coffee was where my people are from, which is from Mexico, right? Like there's a lot of not that good coffee out there. And so I realized, and through like customer feedback, that realized the impact that coffee had, and kind of like the how people could relate to coffee, right? Like there's so many descendants of coffee farmers or coffee farmers here that they back in their home country they picked coffee, and or they own the finca or something. Like there's that connection that's there. So I was like, okay, that needs to be made. And why not help the farmers like while making that connection? So the first farms that I worked with were like Nicaragua, which is Ernesto, and then Guatemala, which is Kenny, and then my good friends here, JJ and Linda. Like I actually, started working with them, and I would hear these stories of like back home and how people like the exploitation. And then I had some friends that I went to coffee academy with that were coffee importers, and it would so weird make that connection where they're like, oh well, we get coffee from El Salvador for $2, and then someone else like would say like, oh, we could get coffee directly from El Salvador for $3. And I'm like, well, how is it that the middleman can lower his prices, but like there it feels more expensive directly to the farmer? Like shouldn't it be the other way around, and that's when I started making the connection that like, okay, these guys are really like, they're not doing very nice things. They're exploiting, and they're like haggling down. And then there's that ultimatum, right? Where it's like coffee only grows like, or like the picking season's always like once or twice a year. So it's like they give them the ultimatum, like, hey, do you want to lose 25 cents or do you want to lose your whole crop? You know, like, and you start seeing that situation. And it's like, it's not only is it like heartbreaking as a Latino, but just like as a human being, you know, like you start realizing like, okay, this is not okay. Like in general, like people deserve like their pay, people deserve to be appreciated. It just so happened that I was fortunate enough to be Latino, and like I can, you know, relate to this, and I can, you know, speak the language, so I can connect more. And it was difficult at first, you know, trying to like sell specialty coffee and then try and say that it's directly from the farm and so at this price point. So it was difficult, but it's definitely rewarding. Like it's rewarding seeing that, like, you know, like we get the pictures, or you know, like JJ and Linda, they'll show me like pictures of people at the farm in Juayúa, and it's like you see everything, you see the hard work, and you see them, like, you know, or you'll get word back that, you know, the farmer said thank you. You know, it's things like that. And to add to, like, you know, Christian's point, it's like you see like Starbucks and you see these people that like just exploit, and it's like it's sad to see an American culture where it's just like, well, at least we get our coffee. You know, like it's sad to see that. But the cool thing is though, as like Latinos and being related to coffee farmers somehow, or knowing that it comes from our land, it becomes a little bit more easier, and to say like, hey, this comes from our land, and like this is what we're doing, and they accept it better, rather than, again, like the whole Starbucks point, where like I think that there was like this recent investigation that came out that Guatemala coffee was being exploited by Starbucks, and I think kids were being only paid like $1 a week. And like it's so sad seeing that, like, that happened, and it made major news for like 2 days, and everyone's like, oh well, at least they have, you know, the pumpkin spice latte out. Like it's seeing that stuff, you know. But I mean, like, we're all like here for a change, and to make a change, and it's a slow, like steady progress, but I mean, it's better than nothing.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Daniel. I can definitely, like, I hear you on all of those points. And I think something that helped me understand the change that El Cielito Café, Café Juayúa, Don Leo, and even Dr. Rodriguez, the change we want to see is just more dignified life for coffee farmers, because, you know, they definitely deserve our effort in doing that. And I can't remember when it was, but I think it was Linda who explained it to me, that what you're all trying to do is similar to farmers markets. You know, consumers understand farmers markets now. It's like the weekend activity. You go, you're buying directly from the farmers. You know, that tomato tastes even better because you know that this farmer, you know, was the one who picked it for you. And I know that that's very similarly how you all describe the work you're trying to do. And just one, because I have so many questions here, and I don't think we're gonna get to all of them, but we're all consumers here. Like, what is the difference that knowing this history, knowing this context, knowing that you know, a lot of our gente will prefer to buy the Folgers can because that's what's at Costco, right? Um, what is the difference? I think that when we are able to pinpoint, like, this is the real difference that it makes. And as Salvadorans with a long history in coffee, you know, what is that? What is that actual tangible difference that you've seen? And I'd love for all of you to answer that. So let's, whoever wants to start, go ahead.
I'll go first because I'm not shy. So for me personally, the one of the things, or the biggest thing that I want people to know and see and understand and just gain from Don Leo coffee: authenticity. Like, there is no U.S. company that can tell you that their coffee is authentically Salvadoran or Guatemalan or Costa Rican or whatever. Why? Because it was bought, you know, like they bought the entire crop, they bought it raw, they brought it here, they processed it here, they roasted it, ground it, and packaged it here. Whereas, personally, my brand was not only grown, processed, roasted, grounded, packaged. The bags are made in El Salvador. Everything is truly Salvadoran, and the process is Salvadoran. And so, and not only that, but it's enhancing, it's helping the actual producer. And like to Daniel's point earlier, like, it's our product, we own it, we control it. So if we learn, like if our people, and during this entire process, I learned that part of the issue is lack of knowledge and education, in terms of they just don't know what the market is like here. They're like, oh, well, I grew my coffee, I harvested it, and I sold it, and then that's it. And they kind of they don't know what Starbucks or the other roasters do with it here, and how much money they're making off it. And so, but they don't have any control over that. Whereas we actually can like help our people take control over it, which is why I love that JJ and Linda are doing this. Like, you're taking control of your product, our product, like as a whole, like Salvadoran product. And I want to make it so that like when other countries see the Salvadoran movement, right? Like Guatemalan coffee, Honduran coffee, Nicaraguan coffee, Costa Rican coffee, somebody starts to do the same thing. Somebody says, oh my God, like somebody's got to do it for our country, right? And this whole movement is created, and all these like different Central American actual truly authentic brands start to pop up and help their own people as well, because it's the exact same thing happening in every country, in every coffee producing country around the world. So authenticity.
Yeah, for us at Café Juayúa, I think quality is for us what the differentiator is, right? So for those that, yeah, I'm sure Daniel knows, and I think that Danny also understands, right, that not all coffee is made the same, right? Even you have to process coffee for export. You clean it. You have to clean it for either American or European export to whatever defects you want. The varieties, right? Like for example, Aguachapan area, right? Actually, the entire El Salvador. A lot of the coffee historically is Bourbon, which is one of the heirloom varieties that are like. So basically, heirloom and Bourbon and Típica coffee varieties are basically the mom and the dad of I think, I don't know, genetically like 90% of all coffee in the world, right? So it's amazing to know that El Salvador, and I'm like amazed. Like, I remember the first time I went to the farm and realizing, wow, the family has all Bourbon, right? Because of the lack of resources. La Montaña was now worked for several years. So going up there and appreciating those beautiful trees, really, definitely quality is where we ping everything, right? And to be able to demonstrate, like Don Leo is doing as well, that you could present a quality product to our community, and it will cost the same, right? Or maybe a little more expensive or not, but the fact that there is quality on your table, it's important for the consumer, right? For everyone that it's supporting, or that really has the ideology, right, to help the farmer and El Salvador economically, right, providing that stability of jobs. I hope we can touch on that subject later, but that's something that the economics of coffee in El Salvador, what we're doing with changing the whole model here of coffee, or how coffee is being traded. So in general, I think that for us, it's the quality will be the differentiator.
And also inclusivity. We had to learn about coffee because we were just coffee producers. You grow coffee, you take it to the mill, and they do their magic. I mean, the reality is that coffee is a highly processed, for another word, I don't know, product. It's not like any other organic, like fruit, where you just pick it and you pack it and you send it to ship. Coffee is very different. It goes through an extensive process. And so as we learn that process, because we were like, we need to take this to market, or else we're not going to be able to put the appropriate price to get our return for next season. We learned about processing, we learned about quality, and we learned about export and all that. And with our farm group, with our farm family, with our workers, we were like, we want you to learn too. We want you to see this product at its as finished product, right? We brewed it for them. We told, we've shared methods, and we've tasted the coffee. We've roasted together with our team. But historically, in the past, they, my uncle for a very long time hadn't even tasted the coffee that he was growing, and so it's about inclusivity, because culturally coffee has been about closed doors. I think Danny once said it really well, right? That it's a curtain that you really couldn't see past it. Well, what's going on? Like, why, And so part of our mission is also to not only here in LA, but in El Salvador, right? To include the Salvadoran community and develop a coffee culture.
Dr. Rodriguez or Daniel, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, like the whole bringing it directly to the people, and the culture now being the consumer culture now being like where people actually care about where things are coming from, and like kind of that transparency. It's cool seeing that, and it's awesome seeing that, like, that people see coffee from El Salvador, and they recognize it, they appreciate it, and the last like kind of thing, or the next big step would be like to actually showcase the farmers and like their farms, because what ends up happening a lot in the coffee world, it's there's a lot of like wordplay as well. So like, for like a good example would be, kind of, people would say like fair trade, right, or a direct trade. So like technically, even though there's a lot of steps, people do get their coffee directly from the farm. Like, they can wordplay it that way, right? So like, we get it from a middleman, but like that middleman gets it directly from it. So technically, we're getting it directly. Like, you see that a lot, and because people are trying to now play with the consumer culture, wanting to be like as transparent and being like direct to origin as possible. But again, like, it falls short on the farmers, because they have to, like, put the bill and bite that. But to have that, like, see, like, like Don Leo coffee, and Café Juayúa with JJ, it's like it's like you see it directly from there, and like, the product is from there, and you can say like, hey man, like, you want to FaceTime the farmer right now, like, we can do that, and it's cool to see that. And then people, they start appreciating that like a lot more, and they start appreciating and seeing, and they get like, some even get into the culture, right? Like, for example, I'm not Salvadoran, but I've learned so much of El Salvador just through coffee, right? And it's so crazy. Like, you'll see people's faces light up, like, oh, I didn't know El Salvador grew coffee, and you're like, oh well, like, you're now, like, and it's so crazy, because like, kind of like tying everything into it, it's like, in the coffee world, when I was getting into the coffee world and the coffee scene, I would try and like be mentored with other baristas and like through other coffee shop owners. And the thing that was like the common denominator was like that El Salvador was so freaking great with coffee. Like, there was no one ever came to you and was like, oh, like, that El Salvador coffee, like, it might be iffy, right? Like, it was, you just mentioned El Salvador and people knew that it was great. But a lot of things, like, it didn't get past that, right? Like people like, yeah, El Salvador is great. Like, I'll pay $5, $6 for it through a middleman for that, but like, they don't help the farmer out, the one that produced that great thing, right? And it's so crazy, like, seeing that. And when I was approached by like JJ and Linda, I think they remember where I was just like, I wanted El Salvador for like the longest, like, it's just really good coffee. And the transparency was like never really there until I met JJ and Linda, and they came to the shop. But just to see that it's growing, and that the coffee farmers are starting to be realized and recognized, and the hard work is there. It's certainly something it's awesome, like, it's something that's very, very well deserved, and it's better late than never when it comes to something like this, because now that this happened, where it's like, although it's like we're kind of smaller scale, right? Like, Cielito's not international, Don Leo's not international, Café Juayúa is not, but it's like, now at least we impacted a small amount of people, and it's only going up from there, right? Like, it's just like having that rock and stone overturned, and now it's just like to the next one and to the next one. And hopefully it's just like that coffee becomes recognized, and as well as the farmers and all the hard work that gets put into it.
Thank you so much. Yes, no, absolutely. I feel like there's so much folks don't know about Salvadoran coffee. And I was reading this a while ago about how Salvadoran coffee doesn't, it doesn't really need milk or sugar, right? It's very smooth, um, and how that kind of, when you look at things here in this country, like the farm bill, right? Milk is definitely something that is pushed. Farmers who are dairy farmers are definitely more supported, right? And so when you have coffee houses are really like milk milk houses, because you sell more milk than you do coffee in some ways, because everyone wants a latte, and so you have a lot of those dynamics too, where the U.S. coffee consumer is used to a heavy, bitter kind of coffee that needs the milk. But we won't have a lot of time, and I want to give thank you all so much, but we have 4 more minutes, and I'd love to give Dr. Rodriguez the last word. So I would just want to make sure everyone else, any last thoughts, and then we'll finish with Dr. Rodriguez, and then we'll open it up to some questions. So any last insight, and then we'll work our way through. And if it can be brief, that would be excellent.
I do have some final thoughts, if you don't mind, especially for listeners, right? That may not be like a super. Uh, I'm sure they're passionate about coffee. So yeah, I just wanted to just kind of like mention, right, and give recognition to El Salvador in terms of like I'm Guatemalan, right? I was born and raised in Guatemala before I came here. But I knew a bit about the history of coffee in Guatemala, but not much about the history of El Salvador. And something that it really took me by surprise was that El Salvador was at the forefront of the coffee in the world back in the pre-Civil War era, and that I came to recognize that as in terms of like coffee varieties, right? Like now you talk about the Colombian Institute of Research, Coffee Research, or the World Coffee Research Organization and whatnot. They're doing genetic studies in terms of like coffee development and varieties, but it's important, I think, for our Salvadoran community to know that El Salvador was at the forefront in coffee technology, in logistics, in the way coffee was being farmed, in the development of new varieties of coffee in El Salvador, right? So that's a history of El Salvador that I think needs to be emphasized. Yes, it was probably not the best social time at the time for El Salvador, but in terms of just coffee, right, and bringing recognition, right, to recognize as we recognize coffee, Salvadoran coffee, we also learn to recognize and respect our culture. So I just wanted to bring that up, right? And moving forward, we hope that we're able to, like Dr. Rodriguez said, right, that to have that present, that the past may shape the direction of the future, right, and be able to bring generational healing through a new model of coffee. And what Danny and what Danleo and what we are doing with Café Juayúa and many other farmers is that we are actually developing a different model of coffee. So coffee is traded completely different around the world. That has bringing us to this coffee crisis that literally we're living through right now. So if you go ahead as a listener, you Google coffee crisis, you'll be able to find out a lot of those social issues going on around coffee. But I think that's what we are doing different, right? That we're actually changing the paradigm of coffee, specific in El Salvador, and we hope that as we want to keep growing, we want to keep honoring the history of El Salvador and the history and the identity of the coffee being traced completely back to the farmer, right, by name. So that's kind of like something that I just wanted to kind of like give a closure as Café Juayúa, where we're going from here on forward in terms of like coffee, right? So we're innovating across literally boundaries and literally making a new path. We are, like literally making everything kind of like from scratch. I'm sure Don Leo hit its bumps and getting his exporting of his coffee out of El Salvador. We did too. And we didn't even talk about the impact of COVID and whatnot, but that was something that maybe we can say for another conversation. But there's a lot to be said, right? And same with Danny, you know, he's completely different than many other coffees here, right? He's probably one of the first ones in LA to really do a farm to cup coffee. So I just want to give a shout out to Cielito, right? And thank you. Well, I'll close it. I can talk coffee forever, but I just wanted to just point that out. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's see. We wanted to do, I hope everyone's still okay with time. I want to be respectful of the time you dedicated to this. Christian and Daniel, some brief closing thoughts so that we can give Dr. Rodriguez some time as well.
Yes, sure. First of all, thank you for putting this together, Carla. This is amazing. It's awesome. It's great to be on this panel with everyone who has such connection to Salvadoran coffee. It's amazing. It's incredible. I don't know that it's ever been done, but it definitely needs to be done again, right? This is just the beginning, the way I see it. You know, there's so many different ways, like each one of us is contributing in our own way, and it's amazing. And ultimately, the beneficiaries of it are people back home. At least that's the idea. That's my goal. That's my plan. Ultimately, one day there will be Salvadoran coffee in Europe and Asia and the US that will be globally recognized for its quality, for its culture, for its authenticity. And it's only the beginning, guys. It's
Awesome.
There's so much potential, and it's only the beginning.
I just want to say I love El Salvador. So, but yeah, I just yeah, it's super awesome hearing everyone's stories. You know, and hopefully like we hear like the feedback of people watching of like how it impacts their lives. It's always cool seeing how coffee impacts people's lives, that it's not just like, you know, a sugary milky drink. It's artistry. It's, you know, it's people's livelihoods. It's like people's culture. So it's just cool, and I appreciate being on the panel. And you know, I'm still waiting for my honorary Salvador, you know, citizenship if anyone wants to give some. But but yeah, like I appreciate all of this. And to those who drink coffee and like coffee, I would say, you know, support, like, you know, the local coffee like dealers and farmers markets, local coffee shops. You know, do your research, check out these farms, and yeah, stay caffeinated.
Awesome. And then Dr. Rodriguez, I'd love to give you the last word here. You've provided so much historical context for us that really makes an impact to how hopefully all of viewers and all of us on the panel will continue as we, you know, continue our work in Salvadoran coffee or food. So please, I'd like to give you the floor to share, your final thoughts.
I was just, I was very pensive and thinking and connecting and just feeling so much from hearing about how each one of us express ourselves from our expertise or experience, I would say, in relationship to coffee. I don't sell coffee. I don't own a coffee shop. I don't come from a family that owns lands where farm trees, where coffee trees grew up. So I think that it's important to acknowledge that everyone comes from a different historical approach to coffee. And then one of the things that I wrote here is that, my approach to coffee now that as I went to continue my studies, it became as a pedagogical tool, and it became a teaching. So, like the coffee bean that I showed before, it's a text, it's a living text. Coffee for me is living lessons. And the reason why I include coffee is because as everyone had the experience here that, you talk to people about, El Salvador having excellent coffee and like hardly anyone knows. I mean, everyone knows the Starbucks and what they sell and how they exploit, etc. Right? Um, and, you know, as equally as people are ignoring that El Salvador produces great coffee, I think that there is a willingful also attempt to try to repress the past and what happened, even just like 70 years ago. And I think that we have to be very careful that in the name of economic development, we first of all recognize that the majority of the land where coffee is cultivated in El Salvador has direct ties to an oligarchic political structure of El Salvador that continues to repress people in El Salvador. I think that's extremely important to recognize it because it is, I mean, more than 32,000 indigenous were killed in one day in 1932, according to the UN and historical data. That is the worst ethnocide that happened in the 20th century. And in the way that we approach cultural studies, Salvadoran studies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we continue to reproduce what I call a synthetic kind of curricula. And in the sense that it's, it's very like package, it's very like, okay, we have to sell this and we have to perform this and then we have to do this. And you mentioned before that, and I think it was JJ who mentioned, that El Salvador at one particular point before the World War I had was one of the leading countries in Latin America that had the most advanced machinery that was producing coffee. And that was because James Hills, who was from England, brought that equipment to El Salvador. But the price, I don't think I'm comfortable saying, culture, El Salvador has a culture of coffee. I think it's important to at the same time talk about, that culture of coffee is inherently colonial and violent. And here in Canada, in Turtle Island, we are on stolen land. And a lot of these coffee farms in El Salvador, there's still colonial ties there. So when it comes to fully acknowledging, it's kind of like a conflicting kind of like narrative that I think that descendants from people that own land in El Salvador, it's a conflicting situation. And I think that it's important to, to continue having these conversations to acknowledge that. And then, and I think I'll stop here because I know that there is some questions, and I'm gonna recommend this particular text for anyone that is interested in what's behind this particular text. That is the coffee, is by Jeffrey Page, and it's titled "Coffee and Power: Revolution and the Rise of Democracy in Central America." So I think I'll stop here because I know there will be some questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rodriguez. I could listen to you chat for a long time. And I put the book here. Is it Coffee and Power by Jeffrey Page? So folks can definitely do some reading here. All right. Well, we do have some questions. Let's see. We do have a question here since you have the mic right now, Dr. Rodriguez. La Distilleuse, I think I'm saying that correctly. Dr. Rodriguez, where do you find your coffee here in Toronto? So if you want to answer that question, Dr. Rodriguez.
I go to Kensington Market. There's some viejitos allí de Perú y del Salvador that, they bring coffee beans. I was in El Salvador in December. So I am one of those ladies that you see in the airport getting off with like una caja, and I just bring a lot of coffee from Chalatenango. So yeah, go to Kensington.
Awesome. All right. We have, let's see, let me look through some of these questions. We have a question here. Uh, Given how you've inherited the history of Salvadoran coffee exploitation, are you willing to use some of your profits and your resources toward the struggle of indigenous communities in El Salvador? So I guess, excuse me, I guess this question's more for the folks who have businesses. So any of you, yeah, feel free to tackle that question.
I'll go.
I don't want to cut anyone off, but we'll try to be brief so we can um, get to some of these other questions as well.
So I'll go first if you don't mind. Well, yeah, that's actually the idea. So I'm not I'm not a big corporation, right? I don't have huge profits. The idea is to grow and change the business model so that in the process, right? Because coffee's always going to be sold, like it isn't going to stop unless we literally burn down all the cafetales. People are the people that are there that are working need it as their livelihood. They use it as their livelihood. They need jobs. And so as I changed the business model by having it processed out there, processed at the source, that is literally the focus of trying to help the economic development and growth. Then yes, while I can't change exactly because I'm just getting started, what every one of the coffee plantation owners does and how they do it, like little by little, like this is my little grain of sand, right? And hopefully as my business grows, I can help more suppliers, more coffee growers, more coffee plantations to grow and to develop and show them that there's opportunity for growth, which should be able to help like the people that are actually working, like the indigenous people of those communities. I'm familiar with some of the communities where the coffee plantations are, like the people that go to La Corta. They go there, it's seasonal work, but they go there because they need it. And so if that goes away, then their livelihood goes away. And the idea is that the coffee industry in El Salvador grows like as a whole. Like it's so much more than just like, oh, a nice business idea so we can sell Salvadoran coffee. The idea for Boneo Coffee is to change the entire business model. So intrinsically, it's built into it for me.
All right. Café Juayúa?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for the question. Yeah, definitely. I think we have to second everything Donell said. I think intrinsically, our business model is obviously to not only obviously provide literally job security for the families that are working obviously in the farms instead of getting laid off for 3 or 4 months while the work ends, right? We make an effort to obviously provide higher income and pay our team better. But definitely, if you have something in mind that any projects that you may have going down in El Salvador, dichos de un bicho, just reach out and we can definitely talk, and see how we can help out in any way we can.
Awesome. And then, Daniel, I'm not sure if you have any connections with the indigenous communities, but any comment on that, I guess?
I mean, I don't. Mostly my end is like here in the States. But when it comes to like the farm and the the profits and the resources, I have 1,000% faith in JJ and Linda because I get my coffee from them. So they've shown me proof that the coffee does go from there and that's basically where as most as my input goes. But yeah, it's a really good question.
Awesome. We have a similar question here from Gerson Martinez. I'm so inspired by every one of you. For Christian, JJ, and Linda, is it feasible to offer part-time or part ownership to your employees so that they can benefit from the profits directly and begin to build wealth? This is a very, very important question. let's start with the Café Juayúa.
Yeah, so very good question. Yeah, definitely appreciate that. Definitely has been, I think, thoughts in the family to see how we can obviously elevate everyone economically in the future. You know, as we're new, like, right? We've been in business maybe 3 or 4 years trying to build this model. But definitely, considering the fact that I think the majority of our people that work in our farm are relatives of soil family. It's something that we've been really considering. But I think for most immediate purposes, there's two to that. Is that one, we're trying to figure out how we can build a business model in which we are able to provide, let's say, some sort of like getting ideas of, retirement, how we can help, for example, our uncles are getting a little, older. How can we help them through their elderly age, right? And providing for them and provide education for the children of the young ones as well. So that's one of, the kids of our family members that work in the farm, or just also we're looking into medical benefits for them as well. We provide for them as well. So there's definitely, I think, that's our mission, right? So for me personally, it's all about the people. I consider the coffee, it's a vehicle to be a blessing onto people and families that which one that's for me, that's basically the core value. Like, you can buy coffee from everywhere, you can drink coffee from everywhere, but for us personally, I think it's very that's kind of like the mission for us.
Yeah, it's important for us not to repeat the same mistakes in how coffee was established. It was established in a very particular way. It needed cheap labor. And it has to, we've said we can't do that. You can't continue exploiting your own people, your own family. And so it's definitely something that you have to do complete 180 from. Like, coffee industry, like how it's done, just needs to, at least on our part, it has to be completely redone.
Right. Right, because as Dr. Rodriguez mentioned, not to make it long, right, but coffee comes with that colonial infrastructure, not only in El Salvador, but throughout the world. So I think that that's something that we want to change 100%. Yeah, 180 degrees from what it was. We know that the current condition of our countries is due to that specific system, or one of the systems that's still active. So we are definitely doing things different, like from scratch. So in terms of part ownership, I think that's something that definitely we'll continue to discuss as a family, right? Thank you, person.
Yes, and then Christian, do you have a comment for this question since it's
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely feasible. However, first I'd have to get employees because I'm the only employee in my company. I do it all. So, yes, my employees own the company too. Um, but no, I mean, the idea is to grow, right? Like, I have to get there first. I'm not at that point, but I mean, absolutely, that's, why not? But yeah, no, right now I'm like the president, the janitor, the driver, the salesman, the marketing director, the social media intern. So when I get there, yeah, that would be amazing.
awesome. Thank you. That's great. Let's see if we have another question here. I know I saw another one. Let's see. We have I'll share a comment here from Stephanie Concepcion Ramirez. She said, "This is unpacking." Yes, thank you. And I do believe that happened when Dr. Rodriguez was sharing. We are past the time of when we wanted to do Q&A. Oh, we have one last. This will be our last question by Emily. Thank you so much to everyone on the panel. This is a very important conversation of exploitation, history, and our everyday consumption. How do we bring these conversations to the table? Um, let's have just a few. Let's hear from the women on the panel answer this question. I believe in following the leadership of women, and we'll end on that actually. So, Dr. Rodriguez or Linda, how I'd love for you to answer this question. Who wants to go first?
Oh, is it unmuted?
Yeah, it's
How do we bring it? I think right now we're doing something really unique and powerful and wonderful. Speaking about coffee in El Salvador and just understanding the history and I feel like the same way as Dr. Rodriguez in the sense of coffee. It's like it really is like coffee in the sense that it's bittersweet. There's so much bitterness and yet there's so much sweetness about this. And I think what you're doing also, Karla, is incredible. That you're conserving our history and our culture through your projects, and that's really part of it too. And I remember when we first started Café Juayúa that you were like one of the first ones to want to hear our story, and having the community like appreciate and get the word out has really made the difference to start these conversations, to like get them out there, to let them know, hey, we're here, this is what's happening. And so thank you for all those projects, for everyone who's just given us an opportunity to share our little like bit of change that we're trying to produce.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Rodriguez?
Yeah. How do I bring these conversations to the tables? I mean, I think that coffee runs in my blood, or blood runs in my coffee, I feel it. I get angry about it. I incorporate it into my teaching, into how I ground the work that I do in academia, to try to unpack how we have been forced to erase explicitly from the educational curriculum what happened. We have, I don't want to think about it in terms of like ghosts, but we have spirits that are with us, and they do not allow us to forget what happened and what is happening. I mean, the majority of right now, people that are getting killed in Latin America right now are precisely the environmentalists that are protecting the land everywhere, for water, for plantations, from everywhere. Like the reason why a lot of people from Honduras are fleeing Honduras and they want to try to leave Honduras is because, particularly in Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, the land, we have exploited it to the maximum. And that is happening, that continues to happen. So, it's with me. These sort of topics and themes are with me since the time that I get up in the morning to the time that I go to bed. They appear in my dreams. They appear everywhere. And I wish that, particularly in the academic context, which is my field, or which is the environment in which I operate, like tomorrow I'm going to be talking about Descolonizando El Salvador with a forum in the different universities in El Salvador. And it's like, how do I even like begin to say anything about decolonizing El Salvador when even like people in El Salvador, there is a whole discourse of not acknowledging what had happened. We're not even acknowledging what happened yesterday, let alone what happened 10 years or 20 or 30 or 40, 50 years ago. So for me as a teacher or as an educator, I incorporate it in everything that I do, because, I'm just really angry about it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your hard-earned insights with us. They are invaluable. They are priceless. All of you, thank you all so much for sharing what you've come to learn and how that's all made you the advocates that you are in your own respective fields. So,
can I just add something? There is a website that whoever is listening to, it's something that I founded recently, and it's sort of like a horizontal approach model to address a lot of the topics that are bothering that are bothering everyone these days. And it's www.seedsforchange.ca. So for whoever is listening and want to check it out and email some of the partners there, I would advise you to check it out.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yes. Here are the Instagram handles for everyone. I definitely encourage you all to follow our panelists, support their efforts. Their efforts make a big impact to a lot of Salvadoran coffee farmers and for our community as a whole. I want to thank all of you so much. Again, in a real audience, you'd hear their applause. So allow me to give you the applause. I have, just immense appreciation for all of you for dedicating yourselves to this craft and to this business, and to then, share your hard-earned lessons and insights, and even, as Dr. Rodriguez shared, hauntings of some of this. So I appreciate it. I'm definitely changed from listening to all of you, and this will be with me. I appreciate you all. And for all of our listeners, if you enjoyed this and you want to send us a tip, we would love that too. And you can send that tip through Venmo at SalviSoul. But thank you all again so much. I hope this was fruitful to you. Yes, a little salud to everyone with your coffee. And yeah, I guess we will be ending our broadcast, and salud.
Nice meeting you all.